Everyone thought they were witnessing just another ordinary family gathering. But when the sleek black limousine arrived, everything shifted in an instant. This isn't just a story about a driver dismissed by a smug fiancé. It's about identity, respect, and the power of self-worth. Before we dive in, let us know where you're tuning in from, and don't forget to subscribe. Because tomorrow, we have a journey that will leave you inspired. The evening air was thick with the muted clinks of crystal and the low hum of polite conversation, a gathering swathed in elegance and expectation. I stood near the grand entrance, the polished marble beneath my feet reflecting the soft glow of the chandelier above. My daughter, Emily, was radiant in her light blue dress, her laughter weaving through the room like a delicate melody. But the smile she wore was tinged with something I couldn't quite place. A flicker of unease, perhaps, or the weight of things unsaid. Across the room, Andrew, her fiancé, held court among the guests with that smug, easy confidence that seemed to fill every space it touched. When his gaze settled on me, I felt it prick like a needle, sharp and cold. Then came the words, delivered with that insufferable smirk. "He's just a driver, you know," he said, his voice carrying enough for those nearby to catch. His eyes locked on mine, as if daring me to respond, the disdain practically dripping from his tone. I kept my silence, the years of navigating such moments teaching me the value of quiet endurance. Yet, beneath the calm exterior, a familiar knot tightened in my chest. This wasn't new. The world had always seen me as nothing more than the man behind the wheel, the invisible hand steering others through their lives while my own remained confined to the shadows. Emily glanced my way, her eyes briefly meeting mine with a flicker of apology or perhaps a plea. But Andrew's dismissal echoed louder, settling like a stone in the room. I buried my hands in the pockets of my tailored jacket, steadying myself against the sting of his words. This was no ordinary family gathering. It was a battlefield of assumptions and unspoken judgments, with me cast firmly on the wrong side. The guests mingled, their laughter and chatter swirling around us, but the tension was palpable. I sensed the undercurrents shifting, the subtle glances exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. The truth was, I had never felt more out of place amid the polished silver and crystal glasses. This world, with its effortless grace and inherited privilege, was not mine, or so they believed. Yet, as the evening unfolded, the atmosphere began to shift in unexpected ways. A soft murmur rippled through the crowd when a sleek black limousine pulled up outside, its engine purring like a contented beast. Conversations paused. Heads turned toward the windows, curiosity piqued. Moments later, I stepped out calm and composed, the door closing behind me with a definitive click. The room fell into a stunned silence as eyes widened in surprise. Here I was, not merely a driver stepping down from hired car, but the owner of that very vehicle, the entrepreneur behind the wheel of a successful business that many present could only dream of. The carefully constructed facade of my status began to crumble, revealing the truth beneath the surface. Andrew's smirk faltered for the first time that evening, his eyes narrowing as he tried to reconcile the man before him with the image he had so casually dismissed. I caught Emily's gaze again, this time filled with pride and a newfound respect that warmed the cool edges of the night. The realization settled over the gathering like a tide turning, shifting the unspoken social order. I remained poised, letting the silence speak volumes, knowing that actions always carried more weight than words. Tonight, the story wasn't about a driver or a man defined by his occupation. It was about the man who had defied those expectations and claimed his place on his own terms. As the night deepened, the subtle barriers between us began to erode, replaced by a tentative acknowledgement that respect was earned, not granted by birthright. I stood by Emily's side, proud not just as a father, but as a man whose worth could no longer be questioned by a single, careless remark. The gathering resumed its course, but the air had changed. Beneath the sparkling chandeliers, in the midst of whispered conversations and sideways glances, a new narrative was taking shape, one where dignity and determination outshone the shallow judgments of status and title. And in that moment, I knew the true journey was only just beginning. The room, once full of polite smiles and half-hidden judgments, grew palpably colder as Andrew's gaze sharpened, his earlier amusement now replaced by thinly veiled disdain. The whispered conversations resumed, but their tone shifted. Curious eyes now dissected me with renewed interest, and not all of it was welcome. Andrew stepped closer, his voice low but sharp enough to slice through the hum of the gathering. "So, Marcus," he began, his words laced with condescension, "what exactly is your role here? Surely, you don't expect us to see you as part of Emily's family just because you happen to own a car?" His smirk was a challenge, an open invitation to be dismissed, to be put back in the box he'd so arrogantly assigned me. I met his gaze without flinching. The years had taught me that confrontation didn't always demand loud words. Sometimes, quiet strength spoke louder than any retort. But tonight, something inside me stirred, a resolve that had long simmered beneath the surface. I was not just the man who drove cars. I was the man who built a business from nothing, who worked every long hour while the world slept, who carried the weight of dreams heavier than any limousine's chassis. "I'm here because Emily is my daughter," I said, my voice steady, carrying the weight of all I'd fought for. And no amount of money or status changes that. The words hung in the air, a quiet yet firm declaration that reverberated through the room. Andrew's smile flickered, replaced by a tightening of his jaw. "It's not about money, Marcus. It's about fitting in, about knowing your place. Emily deserves someone who understands the world she's part of, someone who moves in the circle she does. You're from a different life. We all are." His words stung, but I refused to let them break me. Instead, I let the silence stretch, letting the truth of his arrogance settle around us like a dense fog. Emily's eyes searched mine across the distance, her expression torn between frustration and hope. I could see the weight of the moment pressing on her, the conflict between loyalty and love. Others nearby shifted uncomfortably, caught in the crossfire of a battle they hadn't expected to witness. The gathering, once a seamless display of wealth and refinement, now revealed cracks in its polished veneer. Andrew's arrogance was a sharp contrast to the quiet dignity I wore like armor. "I've lived my life on my own terms," I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word. "I've built something real, something lasting, not because of who I know or where I come from, but because of what I'm willing to work for. Emily deserves that much, and more." The room held its breath. Andrew's smirk had vanished entirely, replaced by a hard, calculating stare. He stepped back, clearly unsettled by the firmness of my words. The air between us crackled with tension, a collision of worlds that refused to blend smoothly. Emily moved toward me then, her hand brushing lightly against my arm. "Dad," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Thank you." It was a small gesture, but it meant everything, a silent promise of trust and a shield against the judgment surrounding us. Andrew's eyes flicked between us, narrowing with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You don't understand," he said, though his voice wavered. "This isn't personal. It's about expectations, about what's appropriate." "Appropriate?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "Is it appropriate to belittle someone who's given everything for their child? To dismiss a lifetime of sacrifice because of a job title? That's not how respect works, Andrew." The gathering murmured, a ripple of agreement spreading quietly among the guests. Some shifted in their seats, their expressions softening as they began to see beyond the surface. The fragile veneer of exclusivity was cracking, revealing the raw humanity beneath. Andrew, sensing the shifting tides, attempted to regain control. "Let's not turn this into a spectacle," he said sharply, though the edge in his voice betrayed his unease. "Emily's happiness is what matters. I just want what's best for her. And so do I replied, my gaze unwavering. But best isn't measured by social standing or appearances. It's measured by honesty, by respect, by love. The tension lingered, but a subtle shift had taken place. The room that had once bristled with unspoken judgments now felt the weight of truth settling in. Andrew's defenses were high, but cracks were forming, and the walls of prejudice were beginning to crumble. Emily squeezed my arm gently, grounding me in the moment. Her quiet strength was a balm to my soul, reminding me why I had endured so much and why I would continue to stand firm. This was about more than just a gathering. It was about proving that dignity could not be bought or inherited, only earned. I looked around at the faces, some curious, some conflicted, others quietly supportive. The world they represented was complex, layered with expectations and unspoken rules. But tonight, I had taken my place not as a driver or an outsider, but as a father who refused to be diminished. Andrew's gaze lingered on me a moment longer before he turned away, his voice lowered but still audible. "This isn't over." I didn't respond. Sometimes, the strongest reply was silence. Instead, I focused on Emily, on the future we would shape together, no matter the obstacles. The evening pressed on, conversations resuming, but with a different tenor. The undercurrent of tension remained, but beneath it was a newfound respect, tentative, fragile, but real. I stood taller, not because I'd changed who I was, but because I'd refused to let others define my worth. In that charged atmosphere, I realized that the true battle wasn't against Andrew or his narrow views. It was against the assumptions that had long confined me. And tonight, I had taken the first step toward breaking free. As the music swelled softly in the background and guests moved through the room, I felt a quiet determination settle over me. The path ahead would be challenging, but I was ready. For Emily, for myself, for the dignity that no title could ever take away. The evening's tension had barely begun to settle when the subtle shift in the room's energy grew impossible to ignore. I stood near the grand window, the city lights casting a faint glow on the polished floor, when a quiet murmur spread among the guests. Eyes flicked toward the entrance once more, curiosity piqued and anticipation weaving through the air. From the street, a sleek black limousine glided smoothly up the driveway, its glossy surface catching the light like a jewel. As the door opened, I stepped forward, the soft click of my shoes on the marble floor marking my approach. This wasn't the moment I had planned to unveil, but the time had come to let the truth speak for itself. The room fell into a stunned silence as I reached the center, the weight of countless gazes settling on me. Andrew's confident smirk wavered, betraying a flicker of uncertainty as he turned to face me fully. The polished image he had crafted of me as merely a driver was unraveling before his eyes and everyone else's. I let the silence stretch for a heartbeat longer, savoring the subtle but profound shift in the atmosphere. Then, with calm certainty, I spoke. "This limousine," I said, gesturing toward the vehicle waiting outside, "is not one I drive for others. It's part of a fleet I own. The company behind it is mine." A collective intake of breath swept through the guests. I saw faces that had held skepticism now replaced with surprise, some even with grudging admiration. Andrew's eyes narrowed, struggling to mask the shock and disbelief that flickered across his features. Emily's gaze locked onto mine, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and relief. The daughter who had always known more than she let on now stood a little taller, a quiet strength radiating from her. She stepped forward, voice steady and clear. "Dad has worked hard for everything he has. He's not just the man who drives cars. He's the man who built this business from the ground up." Andrew's posture stiffened, his earlier ease dissolving into something more brittle. I didn't realize," he stammered, attempting to regain his composure. But the damage was done. The narrative he had so casually spun was upended by a simple truth that required no embellishment. The guests, once quietly judgmental, now regarded me with newfound respect. Whispers of admiration rippled through the room, and I could see the subtle nods exchanged, acknowledgments that the man standing before them was far more than the sum of assumptions. Emily closed the distance between Andrew and me, her voice firm yet kind. "Andrew, it's time to see things clearly. Marcus isn't just a driver. He's a man whose character and achievements deserve respect. If you can't recognize that, then maybe you don't understand what family truly means. Andrew's eyes flickered with frustration, but beneath it lay a grudging acknowledgement. The power dynamics in the room had shifted, and he was no longer the one holding the upper hand. For the first time that evening, I sensed uncertainty in his stance, a crack in the armor of entitlement. I took a breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me. This was more than a revelation. It was a turning point. The invisible barriers that had long separated us were beginning to crumble, replaced by a tentative bridge built on truth. I don't expect overnight acceptance, I said quietly, but I do expect respect. Not because of what I own or how much money I have, but because I'm Emily's father, and because I've earned it. The room seemed to exhale collectively, the tension easing as the guests resumed their conversations with a different tone. Some approached me with questions, others with congratulations, and a few with awkward apologies. The walls of prejudice, once so solid, were slowly dissolving. Emily reached out and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for standing up, for being who you are. I'm proud of you." Her words warmed me, a balm to the wounds inflicted by years of invisibility. Tonight, we had rewritten a chapter, not just in our lives, but in the story others told about us. Andrew lingered nearby, his expression unreadable. I understood that this was just the beginning of a difficult journey for him, one that would require him to confront his own biases and insecurities. But for now, the balance had shifted, and I held my ground with quiet confidence. As the evening wore on, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The long hours, the sacrifices, the relentless determination to create something of value, all culminating in this moment of revelation. It was a reminder that identity was not defined by appearances or titles, but by the strength of one's character and the courage to stand tall in the face of judgment. I glanced at Emily again, her smile steady and genuine. In her eyes, I saw the promise of a future where respect and love would triumph over prejudice. And in that promise, I found a renewed sense of purpose. The gathering, once a stage for subtle hostility and social posturing, transformed into a space where genuine connection and understanding began to take root. I knew the road ahead would still have its challenges, but tonight, the first stones of a new foundation were laid. Standing there, amidst the shifting tides of opinion and the soft glow of the chandeliers, I felt a quiet victory, not just for myself, but for the family we were building together. The man who had once been just a driver was now seen for who he truly was, and that recognition was more powerful than any title or social standing. Andrew's smoldering resentment lingered, but it no longer defined the evening. Instead, the room buzzed with a new energy, one of possibility, respect, and the quiet triumph of truth over assumption. I straightened my shoulders, feeling the weight of the moment settle into a steady strength. This was not just a personal victory. It was a declaration that dignity could not be confined by social boundaries, that the measure of a man was found in his heart and his deeds. As the night carried on, I stayed close to Emily, ready to face whatever came next with the unshakable confidence that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone else decide it for you. The room was quieter now, the earlier tension ebbing like a receding tide. Andrew stood apart, his posture less assured, the sharp edge of his arrogance softened by the weight of undeniable truth. I watched him carefully, sensing that beneath his reserve, something was shifting, perhaps a reluctant acknowledgement or the first stirrings of humility. He approached slowly, the polite smile he wore seeming more genuine than rehearsed. "Marcus," he began, voice low and measured, "I owe you an apology. I was wrong to judge you so quickly, to dismiss your place here and in Emily's life." The words hung in the air, heavy with the gravity of a man forced to confront his own pride. I nodded, accepting the gesture without haste. Forgiveness was not given lightly, but there was value in recognizing when one had erred. "Thank you," Andrew, I replied quietly. It takes courage to admit when you've been wrong. I hope this is the beginning of understanding. Emily stepped between us, her eyes bright with relief and hope. We all want what's best, she said softly, and that means seeing each other for who we truly are, beyond titles and expectations. Her words seemed to ease the last of the lingering unease, knitting us together in a fragile but growing unity. The guests, once divided by whispered judgments, now mingled with a new warmth. Conversations resumed with genuine curiosity, questions replacing assumptions. I found myself engaged in discussions about the business, about dreams and determination, and for the first time, my story was met not with skepticism, but with respect. Emily and I shared a quiet moment near the window, the city lights painting a soft backdrop. "Dad," she said, her voice steady but tender, "tonight changed everything. For all of us." I smiled, feeling a deep swell of pride mixed with gratitude. This was more than a social victory. It was a reclamation of dignity and family bonds. Andrew lingered nearby, watching the exchange with a thoughtful expression. I sensed he was beginning to see us not as obstacles or outsiders, but as people, complex and real. The barriers he had built around himself were starting to crack, replaced by something more human. The atmosphere in the room transformed, shifting from subtle hostility to a genuine celebration of connection and respect. The sparkling chandeliers above seemed to shine a little brighter, reflecting the newfound lightness in the air. Laughter returned, lighter and more sincere, mingling with the soft strains of music. I caught the eye of an older guest who had earlier regarded me with thinly veiled suspicion. He nodded in acknowledgement, a small but meaningful sign that the walls of prejudice were falling. It was a reminder that change often began with the simplest acts of acceptance. Emily took my arm, guiding me toward the center of the room where a few guests had gathered in a circle, eager to hear more about my journey. I spoke with quiet confidence, sharing the story of long nights, hard work, and unwavering commitment. Each word was met with attentive ears and respectful nods. Andrew joined us hesitantly, his earlier reservations tempered by a genuine desire to understand. "I can see now," he admitted, "that there's more to success than just appearances. It's about character, perseverance." His admission was sincere, and it marked a turning point in the fragile dynamics at play. Emily smiled, her eyes shining with hope. "That's all any of us want to be seen for," she said. "Not by what we have or where we come from, but by who we are." The gathering continued with a renewed sense of unity, a subtle but powerful shift from division to inclusion. I felt the weight of years lifting, replaced by a lightness born of acceptance. This was the family I had fought to be part of, not defined by social standing, but by genuine connection. As the night deepened, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. The battles fought in silence, the sacrifices made without fanfare, and the quiet victories that often went unnoticed. Tonight was one of those victories, a moment where dignity triumphed over prejudice, where respect bridged divides. Emily leaned into me, her presence a comforting anchor. "We're stronger together," she whispered, and I knew she was right. This was more than a gathering. It was the foundation of something lasting. Andrew's earlier hostility had softened into an openness that promised growth and healing. While the path ahead was uncertain, the barriers between us were no longer insurmountable. The shared moments of understanding had begun to weave a new narrative, one of acceptance and possibility. The evening wound down with quiet conversations and warm farewells. Guests departed with a sense of having witnessed something genuine, a rare glimpse beyond the polished surfaces into the heart of family and character. I stood by the door for a moment, feeling the soft glow of accomplishment settle over me. Emily squeezed my hand gently. "Thank you for standing your ground," she said, "for showing them all who you really are." I smiled, the pride in her voice echoing deep within. This night had changed us all, not just in how others saw me, but in how we saw ourselves and each other. It was a beginning, a chance to rewrite the story and build a future on the solid ground of respect. As the last guest left and the house grew quiet, I felt a calm certainty. We had faced the harshest judgments and come through stronger. The family we were becoming was real, bound not by appearances but by truth and love. Tonight was a victory, not just for me, but for all of us who refused to be defined by others' narrow views. And while challenges still lay ahead, I knew we would face them together with dignity and strength. As I settled into the driver's seat of my own limousine, the city lights blurred past the tinted windows, a mosaic of stories and lives unfolding beneath the night sky. The engine's steady hum was a familiar comfort, a reminder of how far I'd come, not just in miles, but in the journey to reclaim my dignity and identity. Tonight's events replayed in my mind, each moment a testament to the strength found in standing firm against prejudice and assumption. Reflecting on the evening, I realized how easily society traps people in narrow boxes, defined by occupation or appearance rather than character. For years, I'd been just a driver in the eyes of some, invisible behind the wheel, my worth measured only by the social layers I was deemed to occupy. But tonight, beneath those chandeliers, in the company of those who once dismissed me, I had shown that dignity is not granted by birthright or wealth. It is earned through perseverance, integrity, and love. Emily sat beside me, her smile soft yet radiant, a quiet victory in her eyes. She reached out, taking my hand in hers, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. "Dad," she said softly, "thank you for everything, for never letting them define you. I'm proud to be your daughter." Her words filled me with a warmth that no social standing could replicate. The road we traveled was not just about acceptance from others, but about recognizing our own worth and refusing to be diminished. Emily's respect was the true prize, a bond forged through shared struggle and unwavering support. Ahead, the streets stretched out like ribbons of possibility, the city alive with promise and challenge. Andrew's earlier resistance lingered in my thoughts, a reminder that change is often slow, requiring patience and persistence. But tonight had planted a seed, a crack in the facade of privilege that could grow into understanding if nurtured. I glanced at Emily again, her eyes reflecting the streetlight's glow. "Do you think things will truly be different now?" she asked quietly. I smiled, the confidence steady in my voice. "They have to be. We've shown them the truth. That's the strongest foundation anyone can build on." The limousine's smooth ride carried us forward, a symbol of control and direction in a world that often tries to dictate our paths. But I knew that real control came from within, from the courage to claim one's place, no matter the obstacles. As the cityscape slipped by, I thought about the lessons learned, not just for Andrew or the guests, but for myself. That self-worth is not a commodity to be bought or a title to be earned. It's the quiet strength to be authentic, to stand tall even when others seek to diminish you. Emily squeezed my hand again, grounding me in the present. "Whatever comes next," she said, "we face it together." And that was the truth that mattered most. The journey ahead might be filled with challenges, but with family and dignity as our compass, there was nothing we couldn't overcome. The limousine rolled on through the night, carrying us toward tomorrow, a future shaped not by judgment, but by respect, love, and the unshakable knowledge of who we truly are. If you love the story, like the video and subscribe.